Welcome to the Campfire Podcast.
All right. Welcome to the Campfire Podcast. That is Drew Milhoan. If you go to our church, you know who Drew Milhoan is by the name. But if you've never seen him, he's there. He kind of looks like me. People think I'm Drew, but that's the real Drew out there. This is Isaiah. What is your hair with? Did you just take a shower?
I literally was home for 10 minutes. And I came
Okay, yeah. That's Drew. I think in the stories he's going to tell, there's going to be mom and dad. So just to make sure from the beginning, mom and dad is Kirk and Kim Milhoan.
They've been on the podcast before.
They've been on the podcast before. So if you're just finding us, those are that's the context you need to know. Drew Milhoan, raised by Kirk and Kim Milhoan. They've been on this podcast before. So if he says mom and dad, just know that's who he's referring to. And then to get started, I guess, Drew, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like where are you now in life? And then we'll start from the beginning and then get to where you are right now.
Okay. Drew Milhoan. I am where I am in life. That's wild. I am in Christ.
Okay.
I would say that's probably the only real takeaway from where I am in life. I have a wonderful wife, wonderful baby. Things are good.
All right. So things are good right now. So let's start from the beginning. Let's talk about your upbringing. Because people hear your story. They hear a little bit of examples of you wanting a lot of or like all these things. But let's tell the story in how you tell the story.
Okay. So I was adopted at birth. My biological parents were 16 and 17. They also happen to be step siblings, which is odd. They were kids living in East LA. I was born in Hollywood, and my dad and his first wife had always apparently wanted to have a black son, which is awesome for me. And as we kind of started that family up, we ended up on Oahu while my dad was finishing school. That then took us over to Philadelphia for medical school. And then his first wife started bailing on us pretty consistently. So Trisha was Trisha. Trisha was pretty constantly a source of strife in our house. She would just disappear for extended periods of time, months, sometimes just weeks. And it was usually I would wake up on just random days and my dad would be crying at our kitchen table in our tiny like project style apartment in Philly. And that was kind of the beginning of life getting weird, I guess. Because when you're that young, it gets really complicated to, I had an incredibly loving father and then a wildly dismissive mother at the time. And I think it's just one of those things that bred a lot of anger into me when I was young. She...
How young were you at the time?
She started leaving when I was 2. But the first one I really remember was around Christmas when I was 3.5. And I woke up and I was excited. And my dad was at the kitchen table crying and my mom was gone. And we didn't hear from her for a few months. And it was... It's just, when you're a kid, you just start getting angry, you know?
Isaiah can attest to that.
It's just, you don't process what's happening. It's hard not to internalize. And so then it was just me and my dad, which was great, right? It was great because we had like our thing. We got our little Happy Meal every Wednesday.
Yeah.
That was the big move. As Philadelphia is concerned, that place is kind of rough. So, you know, we did some interesting things while we were there because we were broke and, you know, Dad's in medical school and raising a kid by himself. And never let me see him study, though, which was cool. Looking back on it, though, it's kind of a nice thing to understand some of the love that we get from our Creator from a perspective of, like, oh, I actually understand what it was like to, or what it looks like to sacrifice just normal stuff for the sake of someone else.
Yeah.
From there, we moved to Wayne, so right outside of Philadelphia. Trisha came back for a little while. That lasted for maybe a year or so. Some of this stuff is kind of hard to remember because it's a weird time. You know?
Yeah.
It's so just sporadic and bouncy. I had a one really good friend there, so that was a good one. Philadelphia, not so big on the friends. There's a lot going on, you know.
Yeah.
There was a nice girl who liked me in preschool though. She was a biter, so that was into that. Well, that was good stuff. Wayne though, we get out of Wayne. Trisha's leaving again. We're going to California. So that was Vacaville. We ended up in Vacaville outside of Sacramento. And Dad was still in the Air Force. Everything's kind of going manageable, you know? Mom's essentially just seeing me every now and then when it's kind of convenient for her. And our relationship was deteriorating aggressively.
Yeah.
Because, you know, she'd hurt my dad, and my dad had never done anything to cause any of their issues. And he just kept taking her back, too, which drove me nuts when I was a kid. Like, oh, man. I definitely, I do remember getting hit pretty good for spitting on her at one point. That's about where that went. Vacaville was a trip. I was angrier. It was worse in school. Kind of fighting more, getting in trouble more, fighting with my parents, with my dad. And then in came Mom. Right? That was interesting because we did not get along at all.
Yeah.
Right? My dad was too soft on me, and well, you know, for her, how she had grown up, he was way too soft on me. I think from his point, he just kind of understood what was impacting me a bit better because he also lived it. So Mom tried really hard to get me to not be just a horrible punk.
And when you say in came Mom, you mean Kim? Yeah?
Kim, yes. Sorry. Yeah, that you know, it's kind of funky. I used to call Trisha Mom, and then I didn't like the term Mom because of that. And in recent years, we've kind of worked through that. So yes, in came Kim, and she was spectacular for my dad, which is awesome. And still is. And she was also great for me. I was just terrible.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like a special kind of terrible. The kind of terrible that it's understandable when I look back and realize that, you know, every time I got hit, I for sure deserved it. It's a useful thing.
Yeah.
So that was Vacaville. And from Vacaville, we went to San Diego. In San Diego was junior high and a little bit of elementary school. And that was when it got, like, we kind of started seeing, like, the real big press for, okay, Drew's going to be problems as time goes on. Because I hated pretty much everything that my dad stood for at that point. Because, partially because I was a kid and I was rebellious. And
Okay.
kind of,
So when you say you hated everything that he stood for, what did you stand for and what did he stand for? So where's the conflict in you?
Okay. So my dad always stood for Christ. My entire life.
Yeah.
Right? There's really been nothing that was more crucial to him than where he stood in God's eyes. For me, I don't know that I've always kind of struggled with that. So I always believed unequivocally that God exists.
Yeah. I would imagine, because my next question would be like, you're being raised by a man who loves God. So obviously you absorb some of that, even though you don't want it, but you still get to absorb it. So
and it just honestly it made sense to me.
Yeah.
But I didn't like it. You know, like like I don't know what. There was an anger there for sure, but it wasn't. It's not like I was angry with God. I didn't have that mindset. It was more I was just angry that there was anything above kind of my whiny, angry nonsense. You know?
Yeah.
And I resented that, so I just lashed out against it. Like I was terrified at church. Because it just felt like I felt kind of sick being around there.
Do you think you felt constricted, like there's so many rules, restricted?
That's the weird thing. It genuinely felt like there was something that just made me kind of viscerally against the Word of God. You know, like that's really the only way I can describe it. It wasn't like there was no tangible, this is the thing that bothered me. I didn't have anything I didn't really have any dislikes about the church.
Yeah.
But I did not want to hear about God, you know, like at all. Like it made me angry, you know, like just almost to the point of like the demonic anger, you know. And it lasted, you know, for a while, like years. Because it was just, like, I was just so put off by all of it. So my dad tried to bribe me, which was actually reasonably effective, with, so he would give me $1 a chapter for reading the Bible, right? And that was 7th grade. Or 8th grade.
How many chapters did you read then?
I read the whole Bible.
Okay.
I read the whole Bible. I think in my mind, I was convinced that I was going to come out of that with some way to like disprove the Bible. Giving myself a lot more credit than I deserved for my just general intellect, and B, just that's just dumb.
Yeah.
But I did read it all, and none of it stuck. Like I was angry at the fact that I was reading it and really just wanting to be more of a problem. That took us to high school. High school was in San Antonio. That was rough because I kind of like reinvented myself in high school. Seriously, so there were people that I had issues with in junior high. So there were some fights and some nonsense, and so by the time I get to high school, I'm like, I don't want to deal with that again. So I'm just going to become a different person. So I went I don't really know how to. I went kind of like the fake gangster route. I think that was where that became a thing. So I kind of collected some people around me who were reasonably dangerous.
Yeah.
And built my life around, let me just be this person, you know. Timberlands and dungarees and tall tees every day. Like that was where we were at. That did not go great because the harder you push away from God, kind of just the worse things get overall.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
like we see it today, but like that was my life. Like how far can I push away from God? And stuff got more and more dangerous and more sketchy with time, right? So then it was, some drugs here and there and a lot of party nonsense, sneaking out, breaking out, stealing cars, just nonsense.
Yeah.
Criminal nonsense in some cases, but it was nonsense because it just, the deeper you dig, the deeper you just are.
Yeah.
So that made it through freshman year. Sophomore year, get kicked out of school. That was a good time, It was a good time because I was just, I needed to be this guy. So I was acting a part. And turned out that people will snitch on the guy who's acting like he's that guy.
Yeah.
Right? And so that happened and moved schools. And I did everything I possibly could to get kicked out of that school. They had a demerit system. and it was a Lutheran school, which was bold. And so they had a demerit system, and I actually broke their demerit record, which was in the hopes of getting expelled, because I'm like, yeah, well, I'm going to have to go into another public school district, which was not true.
Yeah.
That was, again, we're stupid when we're young. I was particularly stupid when I was young. So that turned into nonsense. And then it's okay, you've managed to pass high school, which was miraculous. Like, that was just wild. So off to college, and you know, I've always had a very loving relationship with my father without really understanding what it was about him that I necessarily loved. I think looking back, well, I know that looking back on that relationship, what I see is I see a kind of the closest facsimile to Christ's love, and that's what I actually grew up with.
Yeah.
Right? I was genuinely horrible for decades, and he loved me and cared for me when there was no scenario I deserved it.
Yeah.
So then it's college. So we're, you know, I had a lot of respect for my dad, so I decided I was going to go to his alma mater. He was not necessarily in support of this. He was thinking maybe I should just go to a state school rather than attempting to go to Point Loma Nazarene University. And he was not wrong. That was a bad call on my part. So, attending Point Loma Nazarene as a freshman, I was disillusioned with the concept of faith on the campus. I saw a lot of kids who, you know, they went to chapel 3 times a week, they went to their Bible classes, they talked a good game, and then they were drunk and having sex on the weekends. So it was, yeah, I was disillusioned by the concept that everyone was putting forth at that school. And as a result of that, I lashed out against it, as I had grown pretty accustomed to doing in my life. So that, of course, turns into, how can I make this problem worse? And I succeeded by stopping going to class and joining a drug distribution enterprise run out of the east side of San Diego. So that turned into about a year of just selling drugs to the kids on campus and not attending classes. So, of course, naturally, they kicked me out of school. Things were getting pretty bad at that point anyway. Like, I spent a lot of my time not sleeping, driving around doing not great things with not great people in terrible places. And as you do stuff like that, you start to get kind of paranoid. And it's kind of a scary situation because, you know, I was hating anything that even reminded me of God. So but again, knowing he exists.
Yeah.
So there's a fear that comes with that because you're like, I'm going to die eventually. Someone is going to kill me and I am going to hell. But that's not necessarily enough to scare, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to get scared into faith than it is to kind of find faith.
Find faith, yeah.
Right? So that, yeah, San Diego turned into kind of a nightmare because now I'm not in school. I did stay on campus against their wishes for about 3 or 4 months because it was, you know, an easy place to keep stuff.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm no longer in school. I'm kind of just messed up all the time, not sleeping.
Did your parents know? Did the parents?
Well, I stopped talking to them, too.
Okay.
Right? Because, you know, they would pray for me, which was very disconcerting for me. I didn't like that.
Yeah.
They, you know, like they would suggest Bible verses, didn't like that. It was really avoid God at all costs.
Yeah.
It's kind of the answer when that's what your life is. And yeah, it's bad. So it started getting a bit more dangerous as we were doing more and more kind of just nonsensical criminal activity. And then it all comes to a head and I'm like, okay, I need to actually leave. I'm going to die. right? We've pissed off a bunch of people. There's anger going on. Someone's going to kill me. I need to leave.
Yeah.
So bounce out of there, and then it's okay. Well, you know, I'm coming back to Texas, so I go back to my parents. It's been 2 years at this point since I've really spoken to them. Go back to Texas, and I was terrible, man. Like, I was in such bad shape. Like, we're talking 30, 40 pounds lighter than I am currently, sunken eyes, just worn out, you know. And so they're like, okay, you're going to rehab. That's going to be the thing that we're doing here. And the weird thing I kind of struggled with is for most of my young life, I was kind of drawn to crime more than other things, right? So I wanted to be the criminal in a situation as opposed to anything else. And I don't know where that necessarily came from, but it was a thing. So I was like, I'm not a drug addict. This isn't going to be hard for me at all to just go to rehab. Like, I don't care. I'll just go to rehab, get out of rehab, and go back to selling drugs, which is exactly what I did. You know, it didn't really stress me to stop doing drugs for that time period. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to go to rehab and go right back to doing what I was doing. So started selling drugs in San Antonio and couldn't live with my parents, obviously, because, you know, they've got the whole God thing going on. And not to mention, it was miserable for both of them because I was insane and terrible. So I'm living in an apartment a couple miles away from where they are, and I've just gone right back to the same nonsense because that's what I was drawn to. So I go to community college. Again, miracle, passed the classes there. No idea how that worked out. I was a terrible student, you know, just terrible. Didn't go to class, was more interested in nonsense. Like, I'd go every now and then and pick a fight with somebody, but outside of that, I wasn't really doing anything. So I passed my classes. And then Point Loma Nazarene, in their, I don't know, foolishness, I guess, at the time, is like, you know what? You tried, we will let you back in. Well, it's not foolishness. It was grace, but it was undeserved grace.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, so they're like, okay, you know, we can come back to Point Loma. That lasts for maybe 3 months. Then I need to leave again because, of course, I've stopped going to classes, started selling drugs, and I'm no longer, you know, doing homework or... Yeah. So leave school again. And then I go right back into, all right, let's just go back into this life because this is the thing that makes sense. And for a little bit, things were going kind of okay for that life. You know, I'm working in a hotel. I'm doing criminal stuff through the hotel. And it's like, you know what? I think we're going to be okay. We've got this. And we did not. It all blew up in my face, as it tends to. We had a few different run-ins with the police that were problematic, but for whatever reason, God was just like, nope, you're going to make it through this one. And, I mean, there were times where the police had stopped me. They had known something was going on. There was a whole bunch of stuff that would have put me in prison for a very long time in my car, and they just didn't find it. And this happened a few times. So in my head, I'm like...
Felt invisible. You're like...
Right. I got this, you know? And I did not have it. I did not. Because then pretty much everyone I knew did, in fact, get arrested and go to prison, which ended my little... I'm feeling like I'm invincible. My reign is strong. So... start trying to kind of reevaluate how I'm going to live my life. I'm speaking to my parents more regularly at this point, or I start speaking to them more regularly because, you know, one guy dies, a couple other people go to prison, another guy goes to prison in another country, and then another one dies. And it was like, oh, this isn't, maybe not super safe. I should at the very least be speaking with my parents. So we're talking again, and they're still doing that just nastiness where they pray when I call, you know. That's you know, and but it helped. It got me to a point where I started realizing that I wasn't winning at life. You know, just this kind of the constant grace really made me start thinking about what was happening. You know, I was miserable. I was paranoid, depressed, angry all the time, and couldn't really even fake it. You know, it's kind of just, no, well, everything kind of sucks, so I'm just down all the time. And a couple years of that, where I'm at least kind of being a bit more open to hearings that my parents are going to pray for me when I'm calling them to tell them that everything's terrible. So I must have been in my, I was probably 20, 25, something like that. 26 maybe, around there. And then everything really comes to a head, right? I'm in fear for my life, just kind of terrified, feeling like everything is on me, my life is collapsing. And it wasn't like I had an audible voice moment, but it was one of those moments where it was like, you know what, you could do something else here, you know? Like that, I've actually been here.
Yeah.
Because it seems like, especially when you're really far gone, like God has a tendency to kind of come to you in a way that's gentle. You know, like he's not beating the door down. He's just like, hey, you know, I was
I'm
here.
around.
I'm out here.
Yeah.
I've still got you. You know, like,
Yeah.
Because that's really what it was. Like there's all this stuff going on, all this crazy, and for no reason, no doing of my own, like I'm kind of just skating by the skin of my teeth, you know, barely making it, but making it, you know. And so that kind of softened my heart in those times. And then, of course, as I am prone to do, I went back to bad decisions. Those bad decisions included a woman that turned into a very, very dangerous marriage. And that was an eye-opener. You know, of all the things that I never expected for my life, I did not anticipate that I would find myself being beaten by a much older woman who also was my wife at the time. That was weird. But also, there was a benefit to it, right? It really did open me up to be like, this is not working.
Yeah.
You know, like, and yeah, because it wasn't working. What I was trying, everything I was telling myself, everything I tried to do did not work. I was miserable. I was frequently in pain, and nothing was working. So that's going on for a couple years, and it actually opened me up. Where all of a sudden, one day, I'm just like, I've broken down. I'm sobbing after a pretty substantial beating with a vodka bottle. And I'm sobbing on the living room floor. And my dog comes over to me and like lays down and nuzzles me. And then it was like my heart broke open. And all of a sudden, it's just, oh, God's been genuinely just waiting for me this entire time to just accept him, to just acknowledge that he's been holding me up all of this time, even when it felt like everything was destroyed. But I'm still here.
Yeah.
And he still seems like he's actually cares. You know, and when you're in when you're in an abusive relationship, it doesn't feel like anybody cares. You know, like, I mean, I knew my parents cared. I knew there were people around me who cared, but what are they going to do? You know? And it kind of changed everything in that moment. So I started to have some semblance of joy, even in the midst of a really not great situation. And I started reading my Bible, which was huge.
Not for money this time.
Yeah, not for money, right? Which was crazy.
Yeah.
Which was crazy. And so that did something even to my former wife, because it's not that she necessarily got past the stuff that was haunting her, because she kind of, I mean, the demons she was dealing with were really no different than the demons I dealt with most of my life, right? So it's not that she necessarily beat that, but it changed enough. It changed enough that there were times where she realized that something needed to change. And so we both ended up coming out to Maui to get baptized by my dad, which was amazing. For me, at least, it was amazing, because I had, my whole prior life, I had a genuine fear of baptism, because I thought, and this isn't like, I just, like some people make jokes, if I walk into church, the holy water, this wasn't that. I actually believed that if I tried to get baptized, that God would boil the water and kill me. It sounds funny, but this is a sincere belief I held for years. I mean, into my late 20s, I was certain that if I tried to get baptized, God would kill me in the process. I was terrified of it. So it was a big deal to be able to go and get baptized. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it was a big deal. And like, baptism is probably my favorite thing ever. Like, it's one of those, like, every time I watch a baptism, I end up crying, because it's just, I remember that. Yeah. Like, I remember that in a way that not everybody remembers it. I remember it as, I know what my life was. Yeah. I know the pain I've caused. I know the harm I've done. I know all that stuff. I remember all that. Yeah. And so the moment when you go into the water and then you come up and you feel
that old you die and then know you.
You feel that weight just fall off. That's crazy. And not that everybody should experience that, but not everybody does experience that. You kind of have to have a lot of weight to really feel it, that same kind of thing. You know what I mean? So baptisms break me nonstop. Like, Tania, even my wife now, even broke me the other day, because when we went down to the beach for the baptism, she's telling him, well, Drew's probably going to cry at baptism. I'm like, well, thank you. Outed me. But it is, I mean, we have such a beautiful gift in Christ that he can come into something broken and disgusting and turn it into something that God would look at, that'll never not blow my mind. You know what I mean? Because it's not like all my memories are gone. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I still remember where I came from. So that helped some stuff. And it gets it to a point where it became clear that if I stayed with my former wife, I was probably going to die. And, my family was concerned about it. My friends were concerned about it. Like, it had gotten to a point where everybody was like, yeah, you
need to get out of this.
And so I start trying to make my way out of that situation. And I succeed in getting out of it. And she actually was the one who filed for divorce, which was convenient for me. And it's, my hope is that stuff changed for her. Yeah. Because, she ended up ODing less than a year after I'd moved out. So, there were times where you could see that Jesus was working on her, you know? And then there were times where the demons just owned her. And, I mean, it was physical and you could see it. And it's like my hope is that where she was at in her heart was something that got her some peace after, Yeah. For me, what it did was, well, it opened me up, I had met my now wife, the beautiful mother of my child, Tania, at a conference while Dad was speaking on the dangers of vaccinating children. I skipped the conference because I'm a know-it-all. And on my way back in, I see this beautiful, kind of not fully black looking woman greeting people as they're exiting the church. And I'm walking back into the church, and she was like, the event is over. And
Where are you going?
oh,
She's
my
like-
bad. We've gotten distracted.
No. I was like, she was like, where are you going?
Oh,
The
yeah.
event is
Okay.
done.
So she's like, where are you going? It's over. And I was like, yeah, no, I was coming back in because, you know, my dad was one of the speakers, and I witnessed her trying to process how that was possible when none of the speakers were black,
Of course.
because that's kind of my favorite thing. I
Yeah.
love that moment.
Yeah.
Right, Fast? Like, it's
I've had a couple of those moments, like, what, like, yeah. I'll explain it to you.
It's
but-
them.
Yeah, it's them. But yeah.
and it turned into a conversation that went horribly for me because, you know, she wouldn't give me her phone number. She would let me contact her on Facebook, and so when I tried that, she shot me down, but she eventually let me talk to her. And then after I talked to her, basically just did what we just did right now, and she told me never to call her again, which my parents had a huge level of respect for. She was like, I'm going to pray and fast. And of course, my parents love that even more.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, cool, do it. But we're getting married. And, you know, here we are.
Married.
You know?
With one kid.
Married with our beautiful little princess.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, God is amazing
Yeah.
to take all this.
So your story is kind of different from, I mean, it's not kind of different, but it's different because you grew up in a house where you had a present father.
Yeah.
He loved you, he loved Jesus, and he made sure you knew that.
Yeah.
It wasn't like he was hiding that from you. You knew that. And other things happened that hurt you, that made you angry, and then you kind of left that. You're like, I don't give a crap about this. I'm going to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
And then you did that, and your father was still steady,
Yeah.
like in his walk with Christ and in his love for you. In moments you're like, I mean, he probably didn't deserve any of the things he did for me,
Yeah. None.
right? And here you are, like, you know what kind of man he is. He's a very loving man, very forgiving man. What are some things that you like remember growing up with him? They were like, oh, I see that was him loving me. That was him like looking out for me. But in the moment I was like, what? I don't want any of that. But now you're like, I'm thankful that you did all those things for me.
That's an interesting question. So probably the most obvious thing is that my dad regularly prayed for me when
Yeah.
I genuinely didn't want it. He made me feel sick at the time, and now obviously like that was wild.
Yeah.
There was never, I can't recall ever thinking that what my dad did in my life wasn't from love. I remember spitting in the face of that love,
Yeah.
but I don't recall ever thinking that it wasn't love. Because a big part of it is like I regularly joke with my dad primarily because mom actually did hit more frequently.
Yeah.
But dad wasn't super strong with the hitting. And hitting, frankly, it was actually kind of effective for me. It was more effective really than anything else, right?
Yeah.
Because if you ground me, I'm breaking out. Right? They put like the security stuff on the windows, but I found out that if you magnetize them, then the alarm won't go off when you open a window. Do not try that at home. But yeah, so it's one of those things. Like my regular joke is, you probably could have hit me more.
Yeah.
Because it was all I really ever got was love. Like all I ever got was understanding.
Yeah.
And it was the least deserved thing that I received.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's ironic you say like hitting never worked for you. Like hitting worked for you because in high school, if a teacher hit me, I was like, okay, I'll just do it again. But like there were a couple teachers that were like, I'm not gonna hit you. Just sit down and then look at your life and the decisions you're making right now. And that was painful because I was like, because I'm having to like sit through and like think about my life, and then it would ask me questions. Where do you think your life is going with all these decisions you're making? But if you just hit me, then we don't have to talk. You can just hit me, I'll leave.
Yeah.
But if you sit down and be like, let's look at your life, I'm like, okay, great. Now I'm gonna rethink my whole life and probably get sad about it and not do this for a week, but I'll be back. But it's interesting because like the stories we hear about you is that you went off, like you've had some fights with dad and mom, but like they did not give up on you.
Yeah.
Which for most people is like the thing that brings them back. It's like, you haven't given up on me. You've loved me through this whole thing. And then you find Christ, and then you realize Christ hasn't given up on you. Yeah. He's been the constant thing in your life. And then you're like, it starts making sense as you grow older and you grow wiser. Because as you're young, you don't ever sit down and think of situations. But as you grow older, you witness stuff. You're like, oh, that was love. That was love. That was love. I just didn't want it at the time. Yeah, exactly. I knew it was love. I just didn't want to accept it because I wanted my freedom. I wanted to do whatever I wanted to do. So now you're reading the Bible, not because you're getting paid, but it's because you're learning about Christ in a way that's for your own life. It's not like, I want to just please my dad. He's going to give me money if I read the Bible. Right. It's like, I'm reading the Bible because I want to learn more about Christ. And then you find in Christ. And then you meet this incredible woman in Tinea. It's like, don't talk to me. I'm going to pray and fast if I should continue talking to you. And now you're like, but I really like this woman. So what are some things that you've learned that you didn't learn from I'm going to read the Bible, get paid, and try to find something to disprove, to now I'm reading the Bible in a way that like I'm trying to grow closer to God? What are some things that you're like finding that you see, you're like, wow, I've seen this in action, but now reading it and witnessing is...
I think probably the biggest thing that I've learned is all of the different steps that God gave us for our lives are things that genuinely mirror. They're like reflections of things that He does for us. That's been kind of the weirdest, probably the biggest lesson over time. So I've noticed it as I'm reading the Bible. The thing I noticed originally, well, after the money version.
Yeah, after the money.
The thing that I noticed is I started seeing these comparative moments where I had a better understanding of God's love based on what I grew up with, right? The love that I grew up with. So that was like a starting point. I start looking at, okay, well, so this is how much God loved us. Okay, well, now if I look at a pale, doesn't even compare version of that in what my Father gave me, then that amplifies my understanding of it more as I've grown more wise with years, you know. Then the next big one was becoming a parent. That blew my mind. Well, becoming a husband, again, right? The first time the lesson was, I can, in fact, take a vodka bottle to the head and not be unconscious. The second time around, it was looking at how Christ talks about the bride, right? Yeah. That turned into, I have a better understanding of this now in a way that really resonates when I look at my wife, when I think about my wife, when I'm with my wife, when I'm away from her, right? There's a different way that I look at all of this. The more I understand Christ's love, it changes how I see my wife, how I see friends, family, and then having a kid, man, that was the crazy one. Because now I have some idea of the love that God has for His Son. And that's crazy, right? Like, I can love people, but like my daughter is gonna take over on everybody else. And God did the exact opposite of that for me.
Yeah.
Right? Like for me though, like there are people where I'm like, okay, you know what? I can understand God loving this person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like what did you really do that? And you're like, sure, God can love you.
Yeah.
But like he gave up his child for me. And then, so like now that these are the things that I've learned, like these are the big growth, oh my gosh moments where I now see, I view the entirety of the word as a love letter that is so far beyond comparison. And all I get are these little glimpses of it through things that even blow my mind on an earthly level. You know what I mean? Yeah, that would be my answer to that.
Isaiah, Drew is here.
Let's see. I have a question. I actually forgot it.
I ramble.
I think I remember. So what is God doing in your life currently?
Sharpening me. I think we've come into a state as a society where the biggest issue is that no one speaks out anymore. I've obviously never had a problem with talking.
Shocking.
So the more time I spend with God, the more time I spend acknowledging in the Word and really paying attention, the more I realize that I'm being prepared more to speak more. My wife, one of the things that my wife kind of added into my life was boldness. Because one of her voicemail, if you call her and she doesn't answer the phone, her voicemail presents the gospel.
Oh, nice.
Right? And so her whole family makes fun of her for it. Her friends make fun of her for it. But I was just like, oh, shoot. Yeah, you know what? I'm actually not being that bold. And at the end of it, she's like, and I'll call you back and we can talk about this. Like, that's the end of the voicemail. Or you can call me back, and if you call again, I'll know you want to talk about this, And so it was an eye opener because we're in a time where speech is policed, thought is policed, and we have a whole bunch of people. We have a nation that's shoved God out, right? And we're seeing pastors fall. We're seeing claimed men of God, women of God fall, and that's I think the thing, right? I find myself constantly digging deeper into an understanding of what God expects of us. You know what I mean? As followers, as believers in Christ, how am I supposed to talk to everybody? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's been the thing now. Because now I'm just like, I'll see people and they're just like, hey, you got a really cute baby. And I'm like, yeah, no, Jesus makes good children. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right. So before I ask the next question, if you're listening, please subscribe to our channel. Hit the like button, whatever you can do to support us. We appreciate it. The next question then would be, Hank lived at the house, right?
Yeah.
He's been a big figure in your life.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about meeting Hank and what's done for your life.
Okay, so Hack, by the way.
Oh, Hack, yeah.
So Hack was the port in the storm of my former marriage. So when stuff was completely untenable, it was Hack who was the guy who was like, yo, I got you. If you need to get out, just come over and I got you. And so when it finally came time and there was no way I could stay any longer, I ended up at Hack's house and he took care of me. And when I say took care of me, I was not in good shape at this point. You know, I showed up literally lumps all over my head, just messed up. And so Hack took care of me for months as I'm still trying to fight my way through these really nasty kind of absentee divorce proceedings. I keep showing up for court. She keeps not coming. It's a whole thing. And then at the same time, she's sending crazy messages to everyone who knows me. And so Hack was just there.
Yeah.
You know, and he's an old school black dude, you know, like the definition of old school black dude. So he came up in the church, but at the same time, he came up in LA, you know, so he's got a different way of doing and seeing things. But it's been a beautiful thing because his situation in California blew up because California's terrible. And he ended up needing a place to stay.
Yeah.
So it was like, dude, obviously you have to come to Wyoming.
Yeah.
That is the answer to this question. And he was very apprehensive, but now he loves it.
He loves,
he loves
it.
Completely changed how he's living his life. Like he's putting weight back on because he got out there skinny. And the nice thing is Hack actually wants to talk about God.
Yeah.
Which not everybody does nowadays, you know.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you find yourself like forcing it on people and never know how that's gonna go.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a solid dude. You know, he's a war vet. You know, so not everybody experiences that. So there are a lot of things that people talking to him or people who want to talk to him don't have an understanding of stuff that he's experienced, witnessed. You know.
So our podcast is called the Campfire Podcast. So let's just imagine a situation where Drew is right now, sitting across from a younger Drew. What are some things you tell him?
Oh, I mean, you know, I would have to I would successfully convince younger me that I am nowhere near as intelligent as I think I am.
But you also know how difficult it is to convince Drew. So
yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. But see, now we're talking about older, wiser me.
Yeah.
With this knowledge and with the knowledge of dumb young me.
Yeah.
Right. So the big one is okay. You know what? Actually, there's a perfect example for this. So I remember I was talking to. Oh my gosh, now I'm not going to remember his name. But so he was a guy who knew my folks for years. Went to the same church in Vacaville, okay? And he was trying to talk to me about like what was going on in my life. He was visiting my folks in San Antonio. I am a punk at the time, right? I was very dismissive because I'm just like, this dude don't know nothing about me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I was feeling myself, got my Timbs on, you know, got with rubber bands holding the pant leg into the boot, just ridiculous. And so I'm wildly dismissive. And I think one of the things that I would remind my younger self is that this version of me has in fact done more of what he thought was cool than he has. I actually do know where those roads end.
Yeah.
And he was too stupid to acknowledge that because especially like we're talking high school Drew.
Yeah.
Man, high school Drew didn't know anybody doing anything really. You know, like just cocky, arrogant little punk. Like I just thought I could fight the world. Like one of my closest friends to this day, his name's Joe. Joe is a wonderful dude, but he's a monster. I mean, he's been shot 2 times, once protecting me, and then another time by a guy he sold a gun to. And yeah, it was an interesting. But the interesting thing though is that on both of those occasions, Joe then proceeded to win the fight. Right? So when I first met Joe in my I think I'm the coolest, hardest dude around vibes, I picked a fight with him.
Of course.
And decided that I was going to, you know, assert myself by beating this guy up. The fact that I showed up to fight him at the arranged time is the only reason I did not die. Because Joe was just like, I didn't think you were coming. Because you would have to be retarded to come. And he was not wrong. Like hindsight, he would have just massacred me. It would have been terrible. But as a result, I learned something. Well, I learned something later in life. I didn't learn it back then. I just thought I was too cool to lose.
To learn anything.
Yeah, exactly. But I learned later in life that Joe actually, he's kind of one of those people who he gave me more of what the Bible actually teaches than any other person I knew outside of my family during my youth. And it took me until I was in my 30s to even recognize it. And then I asked him about it, and he was just like, man, of course. And I was like, wait, what's you? Yeah, dog, of course. Oh. I mean, I'm just trying to show you some of that love. Like, oh. Did not have any of that. You know what I mean? That was a wild one. That stuff. But yeah, younger me was retarded. Oh, sorry. Can we say that? My bad.
On this podcast, you can say it.
Okay.
I think Riley's gonna love it that you said that. It's one of his favorite words. I don't. Is it? I don't know. I'm not sure. But okay, so to end the podcast. I think to end this episode, for someone out there who is in your same shoes that you were in, like loving parents, but you wanted to make your own choices. You never wanted to follow their footsteps. And right now you found yourself back following their footsteps and like seeing all the things that they were telling you about. What would you say to them then?
Oh, I would say that.
Oh, okay. Also, maybe not just say someone with loving parents. Someone with not loving parents.
Yeah, I was thinking on both sides.
Yeah, on both sides.
I would say that God is probably knocking. The Spirit is probably pressing on your heart, and it probably feels terrible. But if you dig into your word, it'll start to feel better. Like every single day, it'll start to feel better. It'll make you feel like there's weights being lifted, and those moments where anger takes over and you don't control yourself, you don't control your emotions, you don't control your actions. That's the enemy. And all he wants is your destruction. And Christ will actually give you your life. That's what I'd say.
Is there any closing questions? You've been awfully quiet. Maybe because I didn't ask Drew about aliens, but I can bring it up. He said last time we were with him, he said he doesn't believe aliens exist, so you guys can talk about that if you guys want.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything.
Okay. That was it. Thank you very much. If you ever want Drew, he's available. I think he's leaving this Sunday, but he will always be back. So if you live on Maui, like, I want to speak to Drew. If you go to church, you see him. There's only a few black people at church, so you see us.
You know what I'm saying? We stick out.
We stick out. So you see us, and I'm not Drew. He's Drew. So if you see him, talk to him, ask him questions. I'm sure there's so many things that you can ask him, that you can learn from him, and that you can... Yeah, so shout out to Mom and Dad, Kirk and Kim, for praying for Drew and standing steady in his life. In my life, too. I've made some bad decisions while I've lived with them, so shout out to them for loving us both. Yeah, that was it. Isaiah, closing thoughts? Drew, closing thoughts before we end this one? I think that's an hour. A solid hour.
Yeah.
On the board.
Okay.
All right. Well, nothing to say. So Isaiah never has anything to say. So there we have it. Thank you very much for coming on our show. We appreciate it. As always.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Drew.
Subscribe, hit the like button, and all the things and questions too. You can leave them in the comments. Maybe we'll have Drew on again to answer your questions if you leave them in the comments. Thank you.